Hi, everyone. This is Dylan Taggart. This is with the next episode of 360 Insights HR Tech Chat. I'm here with Ayden Hodgins. Ayden is the Principal Solutions Architect at New Entity HCM. New Entity is based in Detroit, while Ayden is based in Toronto, Canada, and he's part of a team of certified workforce software implementation partners that specialize in time and attendance, solution architecture, configuration, integrations, reporting, and end user training. I actually met Ayden in person at Workforce Software's Vision 24 conference down in Miami. And we had a great chat, so we figured we'd kind of bring it to you guys virtually and so you can learn a lot about what he knows. He has a great experience in technology, AI, and his presentation at Visions was really great. Ayden, thanks for joining us, and welcome
Thank
to
you.
our latest HR Tech Chat.
Thank you for having me, Dylan. I appreciate it. Yeah,
And
so
just to get started, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and what you got going on?
so my name is Ayden Hodgins. I'm a principal solution architect, like Dylan said, with New Entity HCM. I've been working with workforce time and attendance now for just about 8 years. It's basically been my whole adult career. I started off as just a junior consultant, and I'm now in an architecture position. I have implemented time and attendance, just specifically workforce time and attendance, across all sorts of really interesting industry verticals. I've done entertainment, hospitality, nuclear. Right now, I'm working on our first workforce implementation in the retail cannabis space, which is really exciting. A lot of sort of new grounds. Um, I'm based out of Toronto, Canada, like Dylan said. Um, and yeah, I really enjoy what I do. It's just strictly time and attendance. For those of you guys who maybe don't know what workforce time and attendance is, workforce time and attendance, if you know of SAP, SAP is the workforce time and attendance is the SAP preferred time and attendance solution delivered by Workforce Software. And we at New Entity, we're a very small team of about, I want to say 10 or 11 people now. I can kind of lose track of how many people. We're growing pretty steadily. We were established in 2022, and we strictly focus on workforce time and attendance. That is our only shtick. We position ourselves to partner with larger companies who maybe don't have their own workforce time and attendance implementation team so that we can supplementally staff them and work with larger organizations to be their workforce time and attendance experts.
Nice. Yeah, you guys it seems like you have a really broad and great knowledge of technology that's coming out there right now. Um, so how did that technology kind of get started with New Entity, and how did that kind of the technology kind of perspective that you brought to you bring to the table for workforce software kind of cultivate a partnership with the two of you?
Yeah, good question. So, I before I was with New Entity and before I was in the workforce time and attendance space, I was working on hardware testing. And so I've always had sort of a passion for software and for development and for implementation. And New Entity was a great role for me to both explore time and attendance implementations, but also be able to branch out more into the software development side of things, being able to build, our own in-house applications, and that's kind of why I'm here. Is working with our smaller team. A lot of us have backgrounds, whether it's with the vendor directly with workforce software or software development backgrounds. So we've got a pretty diverse range of skill sets that was really attractive to me and brought me into New Entity. So we're just in the early stages of some development and some cool tools that we're working on right now. But yeah, just really small. I like working with a smaller diverse team rather than being sort of in a larger organization. So that's kind of what pulled me towards New Entity.
And how did the company as a whole get started? How did New Entity kind of get off the ground?
Yeah, so we have two founding partners, Cam and Lou. They had worked together pretty extensively. And a couple of years ago they decided, hey, let's leave our jobs and let's start our own independent smaller gig. and sort of sell this as, like I said, like a workforce only shop. A lot of I don't want to say boutique consulting firms, but boutique consulting firms try to branch out into other softwares and other implementation areas. And they were just like, hey, let's just be really, 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 really good at workforce time and attendance. And it's been a couple of years since then. I've only been here for, I want to say, 9 months now. But yeah, so it's been quite the journey, and we've had quite a lot of success over the past couple of years, which is really exciting.
Nice. And do you know how that partnership with Workforce Software kind of got off the ground? Do you know, was it how did it kind of come about?
Yeah, so actually, both of our founding partners are actually ex workforce employees, or have worked extensively with the workforce software team. So it was kind of a natural progression from, having worked there to having knowledge of the partner ecosystem. There's a lot of partners in the ecosystem right now for workforce time and attendance. Same with sort of SAP and all these other HRIS technologies, and it was just a natural progression for them to understand, the process of becoming partners with Workforce Software. And Workforce Software has a really, really great partner engagement team that works with us to, direct us towards customers and work with us on building our company and building our organization. So natural experience from their part for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it definitely helps when someone really knows the software inside out and then can actually
Yeah,
cater to those needs. So,
yeah, they've
so
been
one
doing it
thing,
for like a long time, like 8 to 10 years before they started the company. So it was, yeah, it was a natural little progression there.
oh, nice, perfect, yeah. So one thing you talked about at the conference, the Workforce Software conference, was kind of you did an amazing introduction to how you felt AI was kind of going to change the way we work. And it was I feel like it was a much more honest representation of what the trajectory of this thing, probably because you do have that technology knowledge and much more grounded, I feel like, than some of the more heads in the clouds, like, oh, it's going to change everything like tomorrow kind of attitude people have. For you, the way you presented it, that it's going to be a very natural progression of tasks that they can do, and then that's going to lead to more tasks, kind of, et cetera, et cetera. And
Yeah,
and one of the big things was it's going to take away repeatable work for humans. And you kind of talked about how that could be like contract writing and other things like
yeah,
that. But for people that don't really understand how that works, how would you best explain it to them? Like I think people have a rough idea like of AI because it's been kind of in the zeitgeist forever. But for someone
yeah.
who really doesn't understand it, how would you say it starts? Like how like you have it implemented. How is it collecting the knowledge? How is it actually putting it into to use through these like language models that they usually use?
Yeah. So certainly it all kind of comes back to training data, right? Like how much information can we give to these natural language models or these large language models who have a really intimate understanding of human language and interaction, and also are trained on like a very broad data set of publicly available information on the internet, right? So it's for our use cases, it's really about how can we integrate our data and what our expected outcomes are with some of those AI based tools, and how can we explain to a large language model through whether it's prompting or data integrations, or how can we explain to a large language model what our expected outputs are and what we really want from that. So it kind of starts there with your initial training data, or as well as what data you can provide to a large language model. There's been a couple of really interesting exercises that I use on a daily basis where people are like, you'll give somebody a snapshot of something that's written by an AI, and they'll go, "Oh, I know that's AI written." But then you can take that and expand that and give it for example, your email history. And you can show it how you write emails on a day-to-day basis, your cadence, your language, how you sign off an email as context for how it should write emails in the future. And then it becomes almost indistinguishable for people, right? So it's all about how you use the tool and that sort of context, and it's just getting better at a alarming rate, I'll have to say.
So a lot of that, I guess, comes down to just recognizing how patterns and like how we talk,
Yeah,
like it, or
yeah. I mean,
how we write emails, or how we just kind of produce like a human data that it gets fed into it.
yeah, essentially, yeah, I would say that.
And when it comes to time and attendance and more workforce management type of data, what are for a company that's looking to implement more AI into their time and attendance or workforce management kind of strategy, what would you say are the fundamentals that they need to kind of lock in? Because I'm assuming they need good data to begin with. I think one of the things you said at the conference was garbage in, garbage out is kind of how it works, and that makes a lot of sense. You can't just kind of give anything just a bunch of data expecting it to kind of figure it out, because it needs patterns to kind
Yeah.
of be an AI, I guess, essentially. So what are the fundamentals that people need to kind of get together if they're thinking about that as the next step for their business?
Yeah, I would say good, like you said, it starts with good data, but also good testing procedures, right? And good controls in place for your data and in your information and your, security policies. One of the things that we talked about at the conference was, over the past year, how we've seen the organizations that we partner with modify their services agreements to say, hey, you can use AI on our projects, or you can't use AI on our projects, or implementing control gates for how we would potentially leverage AI based tools within an individual project. So it starts with good data, and it ends with good testing and support in it if you're looking to deploy this in a production environment, and a good degree of caution, I would say, right? Like I know a lot of stakeholders with limited understanding of the technology are trying to push it into sort of every possible nook and cranny of HRIS technology, and some areas really are just not well suited. You can't replace the human element of HR, unfortunately. So yeah, that's where it kind of starts and finishes. Good data and good testing.
Do you envision that's based off that? Do you envision that certain parts of HRIS, software or procedures or whatever it may be, we're going to see a lot more advancements a lot quicker than others
I I,
when
I
it
would
comes?
I would think so. Yeah. And when it comes to AI based tools, absolutely, and I would hope so. I think a lot of companies like SAP has introduced some AI based chatbots and AI based tools like really rapidly over the past couple of months. So I think that that's one of the uh, really exciting things for me about AI is at the end of the day, it's a tool, right? And the people who are going to make the best use of that tool are going to be the most successful, right? Like it's a tool in the hands of, um, our workforce that when it comes to, for example, like, building something that, I'm not asking an AI to necessarily uh, perform a task. I'm asking it to write scripts that help me perform a task, right? So I think I'd be willing to bet over the next 12 months, we'll see significant integrations into a lot of HR based tools. Some, I guarantee you, are going to be rushed, right? Are going to be missteps, are not going to be as well utilized as they had anticipated. But I think we're going to see an even more of an explosion over the next 12 months of integration into the HR landscape as a whole.
Yeah, 12 months is not a really long time. So like we're looking at like this time next year, you think the landscape is going to be fundamentally different, or do you think it's kind of got to just going to be a similar trajectory that we're on, where there's going to be a bigger fish on the horizon, I guess, in terms of AI and more promises?
I think we're right now at risk of oversaturation in terms of the tools in the market. It's going to be AI for this and AI for that and AI for this and AI for that. I think we're on a pretty steady trajectory right now. Like I think HR is one of those one of those sort of areas of technology where we're dealing with personally identifiable information. We're dealing with like compliance and SOX and all sorts of other regulatory frameworks that put a little bit more control around how we share employee data with these AI-based tools, and that's a big concern for a lot of organizations. So I think steady trajectory, but with the potential of oversaturation. I know a lot of people and a lot of tools sell AI feature sets and say, "Hey, we got AI integrated," and then it does nothing. It's like makes a list for you or something, right? Anything can be AIs can be a very broad classification, and it's a buzzword, right? You look at marketing material and you're like, "Oh, LinkedIn AI," and it's like, what is it? What does it do? I don't know. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, I think
no, sorry, finish. Go ahead.
no, yeah, I think like I said, oversaturation, but definitely steady trajectory, I would say.
And when it comes to kind of what you guys are expert in, which is time and attendance, or in time in general, where are you seeing the biggest promise right now?
Yeah. Um, I'm hoping that it comes along with some of the stuff that we talked about and demoed at Vision, talking about sort of natural language integration with end user data. And what I mean by that is, empowering employees and managers within an organization to, instead of relying on traditional training to find whether it's a report or where to look in the system for particular pieces of data, being able to just ask an AI and say, "Hey, where is this data? What is this data? Where can I find it?" I think that's the real key empowering piece within time and attendance is, empowering a manager or an employee to say, "Hey, how many times has Bob been late in the past week?" Right? Rather than having to go and execute a report and pull out that data out of the system, allowing that sort of natural language interaction with your data, not just for your end users from a system, but also for key stakeholders within the business, right? For our payroll administrators, for our C-suite, being able to give them really quick couple sentence snapshots of how things are going from an HR and payroll perspective, and being able to answer their questions like that, I think is really, really promising.
Do you think we're anywhere near the point of, or maybe we're already here, like of someone having like a chat GPT level kind of experience where you're like, hey, AI Bob, uh, I want a report of these 30 workers, how like plus or how much, how often they're on time, not on time, and and how does that relate to their performance? Are we at a point where you can just type that in and ask it and it's going to produce it for you and then it'll pick out the keywords enough to be able to produce that? Are we there yet?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, we're there yet. It's we're there right now. Sorry. Um, it's just about these organizations integrating that technology into their existing products, right? And that's where, Workforce's partnership with a couple of other larger organizations, I think, is going to drive them towards that sort of availability, right? Like a lot of larger organizations that Workforce software works with is I feel like going to be pushing them in the direction of AI based tooling, and that's something that you can absolutely by essentially giving the AI like a toolbox, right? You can say, "Hey, you've got 10 tools in your toolbox. If you want to go look up employees' timesheets, here's how you use that tool," and you use feedback from the AI to say, "Hey, if it wants to go look for these 10 employees, then let's give them that 10 employees behind the scenes," right? So I think we're there. Absolutely. It's just about implementation.
It's pretty exciting then because I feel like one of the things that's kind of been we've been slowly leading up to, is obviously simplification, but also usability with all this software. Because looking at some of the industries that I look at in my research, like, deskless workers, especially, they're not all software engineers. Some of them are doing some of these things at the end of a long physical shift or something, let's say, and it would be a lot easier for them to ask an AI these things to do these basic kind of these repeatable admin tasks, or just kind of very black and white admin tasks, instead of having to
Yeah.
sit there and produce it themselves. And in terms of time savings, or just general, well, I guess time savings is the best thing, because I guess that will ultimately lead to kind of profit, like return on investment for whoever's using it. Are we seeing leaps and bounds of that occurring yet, or is it kind of just a slow drip and we're going to see it accumulate over time? Like, are we seeing a massive jump in employee usability of some of these tools, or is there still a bit of a learning curve just because it's not quite there yet for some aspects of it?
I think with any technology like that, there's going to be a learning curve, right? You have to understand that there's going to be a portion of the workforce that's a little bit older than us, that's a little bit less tech savvy, that's going to take some time to get familiar with these type of new technologies, right? I don't know if you've ever, shown GPT or any of these tools to your parents, right? Like it's like, oh, they're like, oh, great, it can tell me jokes and answer questions, but there's always going to be a gradual increase in usability and user adoption. But I think with proper training and engagement with an employee base and the right sort of tool set, I think we'll see leaps and bounds in terms of end user engagement and productivity and profitability. Obviously, like it depends on depends on the vertical, right? Like if you're giving this to construction guys, it's going to be a little bit less applicable than if you're giving it to somebody who's doing data analytics or at a desktop development role or something like that. It definitely depends on it all depends on the end user and the implementation. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of sense. And I feel like I've begun to kind of thinking about it in the simplest terms possible. After we met later that night, I was wondering, I'm like, I wonder how you could explain this to someone who doesn't really knows Google, but doesn't really know how ChatGPT works. And essentially, it is just kind of like a more advanced Google right now. I think at the entry level understanding of it, it's like Google replaced the actual librarian, let's say, or like the
yeah,
expert that you would have to go see in person, or the encyclopedia, I guess.
yeah,
And now that's just expanded, where you can ask not just one librarian or one expert, you can ask almost the entirety of all experts that have ever existed. I feel like for it kind of entering that, not that we're not there yet with kind of in Google, not that Google didn't bring us there, but it's almost like you're able to converse with them essentially in a conglomerated version of them.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if you've seen some of the 4.0 model stuff that's we're talking on the 14th here, but there was some really interesting stuff that's been published in the last 24 hours by OpenAI, with a more recent model that came out that has some um, really interesting capabilities for being able to ingest visual data as well, like live visual and video data from like your phone's camera and telling you, what's going on in the room for like accessibility technologies or all sorts of other really interesting use cases. So, yeah.
Do you think that would ever, use the visual aspect of this? I can see how AI can be used for, someone clocking in or time and attendance, but the physical and visual aspect of it, that data for time and attendance, do you think there'll ever be a use for it? Especially for people who don't work in traditional work environments, like an office, let's say.
That's a good question. I've thought about this quite a bit. That's something that we like to chat about a lot internally, or whether it's over beers or as part of work. Like, what's the like pie in the sky sort of possible scenario of this sort of technology? And that you've probably seen demos online or people tracking worker productivity with machine learning tools that are like vision based machine learning tools to track worker productivity and stuff like that. And I think there's definitely some really interesting use cases for time and attendance in identifying user presence and stuff like that. Not necessarily open AI based, but maybe some of the machine learning and other image processing technologies that will see some prevalence, and I think there's some really interesting use cases there just for identifying users. But in terms of like a time and attendance application for contextual vision, I don't think there's going to be much. So yeah,
Well, could it get to the point where we know, like someone no longer needs to actually clock in? It just sees, okay, Jim has walked into work, he's here.
that's the dream. That's the dream. You walk into work. I mean, you walk into work, you get a pop up on your phone that says, "Hey, are you at work?" And you say, "Yeah," and it clocks in for you. You don't want to accidentally show up to work to pick something up after hours and have it clock you in, right? Like, there's a lot of I think little side gotcha cases, or where you want to be careful with that sort of thing. But that would be super cool. That would be my end goal. That would be awesome to have that sort of stuff implemented. And I know a lot of organizations would love to have something like that to get rid of physical clocks, because you remove the possibility for buddy punching or for other things like that. So I think that would be really cool. There's a lot of gotchas, but I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, or just simply forgetting to clock out. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a very common one, especially for people like I was a bartender in my 20s, and it's like people forgot to clock out all the time at the end of
Yep.
a 10-hour shift or whatever. And I guess for I know you talked about the compliance aspect of some of this. I guess if you're like in a union or whatever, like a labor, like a pipe fitters union or whatever, every minute
Yep.
you're on that site, visually was in sight of this. It does become a little Big Brother-esque, but I guess, and this will lead to me to another question that I have later, but I guess that could be used to help enforce compliance, because it's like, okay, they were on, there's no more need for human accountability. It's like the eye in the sky has kind of seen them there.
Yeah.
And this shows exactly to the second how many minutes they were in this geo. I guess you could do that with just geotagging in general, but it takes any
Potentially.
sort, it's just a one-way street at that point, because it's just something's looking at them.
Yeah. There's a lot of sensitivity around that sort of data, especially like you say with unions. So
Yeah. And one thing you did talk about as well, which I want to touch on now, is kind of how MSAs or master service agreements are going to change to protect your personal information from AI, because obviously it is scraping in sometimes indiscriminately, data. And obviously if we get into facial or fingerprints or whatever, um, that's collected. And then what happens with
yeah.
that? Obviously, I think everyone has concerns about that right now, because science fiction exists, and we all we all know that what could happen.
Skynet. Yep.
Yeah. So how is that going to be kind of kept inside the box, and how are we going to prevent foul play, I guess you could say, and how is that going to change those MSAs?
That's the $1 million question that I don't have a good answer for, right? Like, there's so many offerings in the landscape right now. There's so many options. And what you have to think about at the end of the day is these companies like OpenAI, at the end of the day, they're data brokers, they're data companies, right? So breaches of data are almost an inevitability these days, right? Whether it's bad foreign actors or whatever, right? So it's um, about, I think, limiting data that would be risky if exposed to the public, in the realm that we work in, and in time and attendance specifically. Like, a lot of the times, we don't do stuff around pay rates. We don't do stuff around employees, home address or home phone number. We don't care about that. We care about when you show up to work and when you leave. So the potential for exposing information beyond your first name, last name, your job, which is typically publicly available information if you Google somebody anyway. And maybe when you're working, not so much, but not necessarily risky information. But yeah, it's something that you got to consider is how that's going to be exposed. And it's going to be about how organizations engage and set up their policies and evaluate their pipelines for those type of integrations, and up to them to determine their risk tolerance overall, right? How much data they want to be integrating with these sort of tools.
Hmm. And going on to that compliance part of it, you did mention, or at the conference, I know I keep referencing it, but it was such a great talk. The compliance aspect, vis-a-vis AI is going to be a game changer in the way it kind of reviews documents and how quickly it can review documents.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain in layman's terms how that works and how it is kind of sifting through these compliance documents in general?
Yeah. Yeah. And so the primary use case for us, I think, in terms of compliance documentation was uh not only like state and specific legislature based compliance documentation, but also like these unions and these collective bargaining agreement based documents and ensuring we stay compliant to those. So how that works is we typically provide a snapshot, or whether it's a text extract or a dump of information to the AI, and we ask very specific pointed questions, or we look for very specific pointed outputs from these compliance or from these pieces of legislature. Often they're, collective bargaining agreements, or these pieces of legislature are, 100 pages long. And taking that work away from us to be able to just pull out the information that is specifically applicable to time and attendance is where that sort of power, where that sort of power lies, as well as, taking that piece of compliance documentation and combining it with some of our documentation and saying, okay, does any of our documentation from a compliance perspective not match what would be expected from a legislative perspective, right? So essentially, uploading a PDF is sometimes it can be as simple as uploading a PDF.
Wow. That would be, yeah, save a ton of time as well for people who are maybe not as legal savvy, I imagine.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of contracts are written in very, very weird and very complex ways. So it can be super, super helpful.
And and if AI review of these documents does become more commonplace, do you imagine that there's going to be a bit of a flattening or a homogeneity that kind of emerges out of this, that contracts are going to start all looking the same because the same machine tools are looking at them and producing kind of the same results, and so we have a bit of a leveling of the playing field perhaps?
I,
Or
I think absolutely. And that's a big concern with it in the sort of AI space right now, is that the training data sets, with some of these models that we have available to us right now, the training data sets are based on, publicly available data over the past couple of years. And over the next 4, 5, 6 years, a lot of the publicly available data, like you said, may have been produced by an AI, right? So you're training an AI on AI produced data. So you have this sort of, you know, uh, almost self-destructive nature where an AI can't differentiate between human and AI generated content. So I definitely see us moving towards if we can get wider adoption, this is probably 5 to 10 years out, but definitely a flattening in terms of a contract review language. At the end of the day, we're never replacing lawyers, so they won't let us. So maybe some flattening, but never too much. Lawyers need to keep their jobs.
yeah, yeah, though, yeah, it seems like if anything their jobs are going to be either greatly made easier or enhanced, because I do wonder if it's going to come, when we're going to have that level of comfortability where it's like, I'm not going to do it the AI did it,
Yeah.
with things like this, where it is like, when a contract millions or billions of dollars can be at stake. Which leads me to another question, which is about kind of chatbots. I think you talked about them a bit at
Yeah.
the conference. And even from my personal experience, maybe because we grew up with chatbots that were not that amazing, uh, there's a bit of like I don't want to talk to this thing kind of mentality. I still personally have, especially when I see that thing pop up in the right hand corner of some websites. Yes, it could be helpful, but no, I don't want to talk to it.
Yeah.
Um, how could AI increase just the kind of the user enjoyment factor of speaking to a chatbot? And how do you think, what are the steps that we kind of need to take to kind of make that a more enjoyable experience for people, so they are actually engaging with them and not just clicking the X on the chatbot?
Yeah. I think clicking the X in the chatbot's an inevitability for a lot of people, right? Like that's like you said, it's just kind of built in for me. I hear that sound, see that pop up, and I'm like, just no. I think it's about showcasing the potential for these sort of chatbots, right? Like it's at the end of the day, it is taking work away from other people, right? Like end user agents, if we're talking about, actually chatting with a real person or, making a phone call. I think it's about showcasing the potential for the technology, but also, maybe not moving too fast on that sort of thing on these AI based chatbots. I know there was a story a couple months ago where a guy on I think it was a GM website got an AI chatbot to promise him a free car or something like that. So it's there's catches, there's caveats with it, and I think that um its strength is going to be in understanding end users' questions a little bit better and being able to direct you to a place where you can get an answer, but not necessarily responding to and resolving your full query quite yet. Though that sort of AI based chatbot in like a website is one thing, but then there's like that's kind of like an annoyance, but something that's built into like a time and attendance tool, I think would be really powerful. Having it as an assistant instead of a a prompt or an annoyance to you on any given website. So
Hmm. Well, I guess we can all hope for a better chatbot future. 'Cause right now, it's looking a little bleak. But
yeah, yeah.
listen, listen, Ayden, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. And
Oh, thank you.
why don't you tell people where they can find you if they're able to reach out, or what you got going on, or and anything exciting that New Entity's up to coming up in the next couple
Yeah.
months.
Yeah, so not a whole lot that we're going to be pushing out in the next couple months, but if you need to find us, you can check us out at newentityhcm.com. If you want to send us an email, we're info@newentityhcm.com. If you have any questions about anything we've talked about, anything AI and HRIS related, we're happy to have a conversation with you. We're working on some cool tools internally that we're hoping to publish out to the public in the next 6 to 12 months for the HR landscape. We're starting to develop our own tools. So, keep your ear to the ground and we may have some stuff published on LinkedIn. But yeah, check us out. I'd love to chat with you.
Cool. Well, with that, thanks everyone for tuning in, and see you next time.